Hello, me again, Joe from Still Life and Anarcho-Capitalism, answering another one of the questions that you sent in quite a while ago when I said I was going to start making these videos. So Matt asks, why should communists even debate capitalists? AnCom versus AnCap debate, etc. Doesn't this only serve to validate and disseminate their corrupt ideology by pretending that for every left-wing principle there is a corresponding and possibly equally as valid part of right-wing capitalist ideology that must be debated and given full consideration? Debate isn't really the main focus of SLANCAP, if you hadn't noticed. I mean, debates do happen, but that's not really the main thrust of what's going on. We're just laughing at an ideology that would be dangerous if it wasn't hilarious. There's already places you can go online for a debate, but the AnCaps seem to just argue in circles, and you find yourself going over the same point again and again. I could give you examples, but there's too many to choose from. You can look in the threads of our page or any page that has got anarcho-capitalists arguing with real anarchists. A classic one is when they show up and say that anarchist socialists must be statists, because socialism is statism as far as they know. And you explain that actually no, there's authoritarian socialism and libertarian socialism, and we're the latter. So then they ask you how you'll force people to agree with you. And you say, well, we wouldn't force people to agree with us because collectivization means that everyone has a stake, everyone gets a say. People could continue to sell themselves into wage slavery if they wanted, and nobody would try and stop them. But the point is that nobody would want to do that if they had better options, and we want to make sure they do. Ah, they reply. But what if an individual disagrees with the collective, and the collective coerces the individual into going along with their decision? I've proved that you're all statists. And you explain that, no, a collective doesn't continue to be a collective when individual members aren't having their fair say. The needs of a collective are the needs of the individuals that make it up. The collective exists to satisfy those individual needs, or its existence just can't be justified. And then they get confused and ask you again how you'll force people to agree with you. And they accuse you of being a Stalinist again, and then you have to go through it all again from the beginning. There's no straightforward logical progression through a reasoned argument with them. Just logical loop-de-loops and like backward reasoning, where they start with a conclusion and then try to justify it by working backwards from it. They call it an a priori assumption. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right because I've never heard anyone say it, I've only read it. A priori, I don't know. They call it an a priori assumption, and if you challenge them on it, they'll be sure to ask, do you even prax, bro? Praxeology is something to look up if you haven't heard of it. It's basically a made-up science used by economists of the Austrian school to try and validate their nonsense, and it claims to explain the logic of human action. But it's a science that rejects the scientific method of empiricism, which I think strange considering they claim John Locke as the forefather of their ideas. I'll put a link in the description for you to learn about praxeology and their a priori assumptions. I've gone off topic now, but my point is that it's very predictable getting into a debate with them. It gets boring really quickly because it's obvious that they're either not trying to have a sensible, serious conversation and they're just dicking about, or they're trying to argue but not thinking for themselves. They just quote everything they've read that was like self-affirmation for sociopaths in Ayn Rand novels and on Mises.org. Mises? Mises? All that stuff they read that made them feel a little less conflicted because it made them feel like it was okay to have a dark side that's mean, antisocial, selfish and greedy. I can understand it in a way. We can all be really horrible, mean and greedy. We all have that side to us, and it is comforting to be told that it's okay, I guess, but it's only really okay if you aim to maintain an awareness of it and acknowledge it and try to move toward balancing yourself out by nurturing that other side of you as well, the side that isn't a dick. Sometimes it seems like AnCaps are reading AnCap literature pretty much exclusively, so there's no balance there. They nurture the nasty side but neglect to cultivate kindness and compassion in their character. That's alliteration. That's a nice little linguistic rhetorical device there that's used to make speeches sound believable and poems sound nice. Do you see what I did there? Anyway, if they can't convince you with quotes from their aforementioned holy texts or with mythical tales of the invisible hand or by asking you whether you even prax, then they usually just resort to violence, which is just so capitalism. When you think about it, it's happened a few times on our page that if people disagree with each other's nonsense, they just start laying down the gauntlet for fist fights or actual pistol duels. And we've actually had that on our page, people trying to arrange to settle their disputes with fist fights or actually shooting each other. We say it on our page sometimes, and it really is like arguing with a child who insists he's a helicopter. You just can't argue with that logic. It's the logic of someone that lives in a fantasy world. You can only laugh at it. Don't entertain it for a second, but be entertained by it until they realise that what they believe is so laughable that everyone else is laughing at them. Yeah, I'm a helicopter. Are you? So I don't know if it's a question of whether anarchists and anarchist-communists should debate with anarcho-capitalists. You don't have to if you don't want to. But the best reason I can think of, if you are looking for a way to justify the many hours you've spent face-palming over your keyboard, then I would say it's that having our ideas challenged gives us a chance to help solidify our understanding of the old literature that we read in relation to like modern understandings of things that people have. Like, you're probably not going to convince them, but at least you have a chance to like test your understanding of your own beliefs and ideas. We can get an intellectual understanding of the classical anarchists by reading their work, but to develop a more practicable, maybe more useful understanding, you have to talk about it to people. People who haven't read it, not just AnCaps, but other people as well. And some people say that you don't really understand something if you can't explain it to other people. I don't know where that comes from, but that's definitely a thing. I've heard people say that. But I'd say that AnCaps are just a practice go at debating anarchism, really. It's not about trying to convince them, but it's just a confidence booster for you, maybe, before discussing it with more reasonable and balanced people. I've heard that sometimes if you're training to fight in a boxing match, then they might deliberately put you against a weaker opponent at the start of your training, and then they let you get a few wins in, and then that builds your confidence. So think of it like, before you try and explain anarchism to your partner or your friends, the AnCaps are like your fluffer. They're preparing you to perform when it matters, when you're talking to someone whose opinion actually counts to you. Also, it's a bit easier to explain anarchism to your nan when you've already had a crack at explaining it to people with outdated views that are a bit racist and that believe in some kind of invisible guiding force that makes everything seem somehow alright and to make sense, even though things are obviously not alright and definitely don't make sense. The invisible hand works in mysterious ways. Yeah, thanks, Nan. So yeah, in conclusion, no one's trying to tell you whether you should or shouldn't debate with anarcho-capitalists, are they? And if they are, you should tell someone about that. I suppose if you do debate with them, it gives them the opportunity to try to validate and disseminate their ideas, as I think you put it, but they rarely use the opportunity to do so. I mean, they're not trying to learn anything. A lot of the time, they're closed off to any new information that conflicts with what they already believe. So to have a debate with them is really not going to get you anywhere, as I said. And I think laughing at them is a much more useful tactic, not to mention entertaining for us. The reason we're actually called Still Laughing is a tribute to Still Laughing at the English Defence League and Still Laughing at the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP. The EDL were quite successful at whipping up tension and fear, and they were getting really big really fast, but Still Laughing at the English Defence League and Still Laughing at UKIP and other Still Laughing pages like Still Laughing at the Daily Mail, Still Laughing at Britain First, they popped up too, and they made it acceptable to just be having none of their nonsense, to be an anti-fascist, and being anti-fascist became more accepted in the mainstream, almost fashionable. People started just refusing to take them seriously at all. The English Disco Lovers became the most popular EDL page on Facebook instead of the English Defence League. And, we laughed and laughed and laughed until the shame just broke them. They still exist, I think, but with much fewer members. And so, from my experience, this tactic works. It's worked here. So I hope that's a satisfactory answer for you, Matt. You might think that we give undue attention to a movement that some people just might not have heard of if we didn't tell them about it, but we don't want to just ignore anarcho-capitalism like a lump on our bollock and hope it goes away, because it won't. We want to remove it and maintain a sense of humour about it all. So thanks for watching. Please like and leave a comment, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you want to see my big old face all over your screen again. Go and take a look at our Facebook page if you haven't already seen it, and our website at www.slancap.com. There's some video links in the description to make up for my video's complete lack of substance. I'm sorry about that.